Hey guys, tonight we trade our cozy blankets for damp wool, and the gentle hum of your fan for the distant, unsettling silence of a very specific Christmas Eve. Imagine, for a moment, swapping your comfy mattress for a bed of frozen mud, and your late-night snack for a hardtack biscuit that could probably chip a tooth. Honestly, if you were actually there, surviving the night would be a bigger plot twist than anything Hollywood could cook up. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Always curious to see how far these sleepy stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself, or rather, your consciousness is gently lowered, not onto a plush pillow, but into the chilling, clammy embrace of a trench somewhere in Flanders. It's Christmas Eve, 1914, and the air bites with a crisp, damp cold that seems to burrow straight into your bones, no matter how many layers of scratchy, mud-caked wool you're wearing. The sky above is a bruised, inky black, dotted with a sparse scattering of indifferent stars, occasionally obscured by the low, heavy clouds that promise more of the dreary, bone-soaking drizzle that is your constant companion here. Your breath plumes in front of you, a fleeting ghost in the frigid air, as you shift your weight, the thick, cloying mud sucking at your worn boots with a sound like a reluctant kiss. This isn't just mud, it's a sort of primordial soup, thick enough to lose a boot and, on a particularly bad day, perhaps your will to live. It coats everything, your uniform, your rifle. The very air you breathe seems to carry the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic and vaguely organic that you've learned to ignore. The trench walls, shored up with sandbags and hastily cut timber, weep with moisture, a constant, silent reminder of the damp that permeates every fiber of your being. Normally, this stretch of the Western Front is a symphony of discord. A cacophony of distant artillery rumbling like an angry stomach, the sharp, frantic crackle of rifle fire, the mechanical stutter of a machine gun, the occasional, chilling whistle of a shell arcing overhead before its ground-shaking thud. Even the nearer sounds are abrasive, the nervous cough of a comrade, the clink of equipment, the low murmur of tired conversations, the rustle of rats, those ever-present, unwelcome landlords of the trenches, scurrying through the refuse. You know these sounds intimately. They are the soundtrack to your new, grim reality, a constant, low-level hum of anxiety that never truly leaves you. But tonight is different. It's as if someone somewhere has pressed a colossal mute button on the world. The familiar sounds of war are momentarily hushed, replaced by an eerie, almost deafening stillness. It's so quiet, you can almost hear the collective sigh of relief from every eardrum within a 5-mile radius. Or maybe that's just your own tinnitus kicking in, a phantom echo of battles past. You find yourself straining your ears, almost willing the usual chaos to return, because this silence is more unsettling than any barrage. It's a silence that screams questions. Is it a trap? Are they planning something? Have they simply run out of ammunition, like a particularly ill-prepared camping trip where you forgot the matches and the marshmallows? You glance around, your eyes, accustomed to the dim, searching the faces of your comrades. They mirror your own expression, a mix of profound weariness, cautious confusion, and a flicker of something akin to disbelief. A young lad, barely old enough to shave, nervously clears his throat, the sound shockingly loud in the sudden vacuum. He looks at you, his eyes wide, and you offer a small, reassuring nod, though your own stomach is doing a nervous jig. You know, if you're into minimalist living and don't mind sharing your bed with a few 100,000 of your closest rodent friends, trench life really has its charms. Just kidding, it's awful. The cold, the mud, the constant threat of a sniper's bullet or a random shell. It grinds you down, physically and mentally. The sheer, overwhelming reality of the trenches, especially in winter, was a brutal daily struggle for survival, not just against the enemy, but against the elements and disease. It's a mainstream historical fact that trench foot, a debilitating condition caused by prolonged exposure to cold, wet, unsanitary conditions, was rampant, often leading to gangrene and amputation. Soldiers would try everything from constantly changing socks to greasing their feet with whale oil to prevent it, though often to no avail. ***, you can almost feel the familiar ache in your own feet, a dull throb that speaks of perpetually damp boots and the ever-present threat of that particular horror. The stillness deepens, becoming not just an absence of noise, but a palpable presence, a heavy blanket draped over the battlefield. You can hear the distant drip of water somewhere down the trench, the soft scuttle of a rat, probably heading towards someone's meager ration pack, the little scoundrels, and the shallow, ragged breaths of the men around you. Each sound, no matter how small, is amplified by the sheer lack of anything else. It's almost as if the world has paused, taking a collective breath before, what? This unexpected quiet is so profound, so alien to the rhythm of war, that it sparks a tiny, dangerous tendril of hope in the pit of your stomach. You try to squash it down. Hope is a luxury you can't afford here. It makes the inevitable return to brutality even harder. Yet it persists. The silence itself becomes a character, an entity holding its breath alongside you. Historians still argue whether the initial quiet was a deliberate, coordinated cessation of hostilities orchestrated by higher commands, or simply a spontaneous, mutual exhaustion that descended upon the weary soldiers on both sides. Was it a silent, unspoken agreement born of shared misery, or a calculated pause in a deadly game? From your vantage point, deep in the mud, it feels entirely unplanned, a bizarre, almost magical anomaly in the relentless grind of conflict. It feels like the world has simply stopped for a moment to listen to nothing, and that nothing is everything. The silence itself is a question, hanging heavy in the freezing air, pregnant with possibility, or perhaps with a deeper, more insidious dread. You wrap your threadbare greatcoat tighter around you, the ruffle doing little to ward off the penetrating cold. Your fingers, stiff with the chill, instinctively find the worn wooden stock of your rifle, a familiar comfort, even in this strange, quiet moment. The mud squelches softly under your boots as you shift, trying to find a less uncomfortable position against the damp trench wall. It's Christmas Eve, you remind yourself, a night that, in another life, would be filled with warmth, light, laughter, and the gentle crackle of a fire. Here, there's only the cold, the dark, and this unnerving, profound quiet. A quiet that feels both fragile and impossibly vast, stretching across the desolate expanse of no man's land, hinting at something utterly improbable. The silence, as you remember it, had been absolute, heavy like a physical thing pressing down on your eardrums. A silence so profound it felt unnatural, like someone had hit the mute button on the entire Western Front. You'd been half expecting the usual symphony of distant rifle fire, the occasional cough of a machine gun, or the truly delightful thump-whistle screech of an incoming shell. But there was nothing. Just the whisper of the wind teasing the barbed wire and the rhythmic drip of water from the dugout roof, sounding almost offensively loud in the sudden void. You might have even started to wonder if you'd gone deaf, which, honestly, wouldn't have been the worst thing to happen in this particular job. Less noise, more peace, right? Though probably not ideal for dodging bullets. Then, from the enemy lines, from the direction you'd only ever associated with death, danger, and the occasional poorly aimed German potato masher grenade, a sound began to unfurl itself into the frosty air. It wasn't the guttural roar of an order, nor the sharp crack of a rifle. No, it was music. A single, clear male voice singing. And not just any song. A carol. It was Stille Nacht. Silent Night. Now imagine this. You're a British Tommy, shivering in a muddy ditch miles from home, surrounded by chaps who look as miserable as you feel. And suddenly, the very people you're supposed to be trying to kill are serenading you. It's the kind of plot twist that would get a script thrown out of a Hollywood meeting for being too unbelievable. But here you are living it. The sound was impossibly pure, carrying effortlessly across the frozen, churned-up earth of no man's land. It was like a single, perfectly formed snowflake drifting down onto a scorched battlefield, utterly out of place, yet undeniably beautiful. The voice was strong, resonant, and though you couldn't understand the German words, the melody was unmistakable. It was a tune that had probably been sung in your own village church, around your own family's piano, just a few Christmases ago. The irony, as they say, was thicker than the trench mud. You found yourself leaning forward, almost imperceptibly, straining to catch every note. Your breath plumed out in white clouds, and for a moment, the cold that had been gnawing at your bones seemed to recede, replaced by a different kind of chill, the shiver of astonishment. Your mates, previously hunched and silent, were stirring too. Heads lifted from knees, eyes wide and fixed on the darkness opposite. A low murmur rippled through your section, a mixture of confusion and a tentative, almost fearful curiosity. "Did you hear that, Sarge?" someone whispered, the question barely audible. I heard it, Davies," the sergeant grumbled, but his voice lacked its usual gruffness. There was a note of bewildered wonder in it, too. Bloody Fritz singing carols. What next? Are they going to invite us over for tea and biscuits? His attempt at sarcasm fell flat, lost in the sheer unlikeliness of the moment. It was a stark, almost violent contrast to the usual auditory landscape of the front. Normally, your ears were finely tuned to distinguish between the distant rumble of artillery, the closer thwack of a sniper's shot, and the dreaded whistle of a mortar round. You lived by sound, your very survival often depending on interpreting its nuances. But this was a sound that defied all training, all expectation. It was an act of audacious, almost insane, normalcy in the heart of the abnormal. Historians still argue whether the initial singing was a spontaneous, isolated act by a few soldiers, or if there was a more widespread, almost coordinated, effort to initiate communication through song. Some accounts suggest it began with a single German soldier, perhaps a tenor from civilian life, simply unable to contain the spirit of the season. Others point to multiple units across the lines beginning to sing simultaneously, as if an unspoken agreement had been reached without a single word being exchanged. What's clear is that it spread like wildfire, a silent, musical contagion. The lone voice from the German trench was soon joined by others. A second, then a third, harmonizing, creating a small, impromptu choir. The sound grew, gaining richness and depth, swelling into a wave of melody that washed over no man's land. You could almost feel the vibrations of their voices in the frozen earth beneath your boots. It wasn't just Stille Nacht now. Other German carols, unfamiliar yet still recognizably festive, began to weave into the fabric of the night. It was a profoundly unsettling experience. Your mind, conditioned for months to view the enemy as a faceless, dehumanized threat, was now being challenged by the most human of expressions, song. These weren't just Huns or botches anymore. They were men like you, who knew the words to Christmas carols. Men who presumably also had families, homes, and a longing for peace. It was a jarring realization, like suddenly seeing the reflection of your own face in the eyes of a supposed monster. You could almost feel the collective intake of breath from your trench. The tension was palpable, a mix of apprehension and a strange, almost hopeful wonder. Was this a trick? A new form of psychological warfare? Would the singing suddenly stop, replaced by a hail of bullets? Your finger instinctively brushed the cold metal of your rifle, but you didn't raise it. No one did. The music held you captive, suspended between suspicion and awe. A peculiar, almost quirky tidbit from some accounts of the truce is that in some sectors, the Germans, wanting to ensure their message of peace was heard clearly, would sometimes bring out small, portable Christmas trees, adorned with candles, and place them on their parapets. Imagine that, a glowing, festive beacon, right there on the front line, in defiance of all the rules of engagement. It was a visual declaration of their intent, a silent, flickering invitation to a moment of shared humanity. You didn't see a tree in your section, but the sound of their carol was just as bright, just as clear. Then, almost instinctively, a few voices from your own trench began to respond. Not with gunfire, but with song. A hesitant, slightly off-key rendition of the first Noel started, then God Rest You Merry Gentlemen. It was quiet at first, almost shy, as if afraid to break the fragile spell. But as more voices joined in, gaining confidence, a truly surreal musical dialogue began. One side would sing a carol, then the other would respond, sometimes with the same carol in English, sometimes with a different one. It was like a very slow, very polite, and incredibly dangerous sing-off. Oh, you know Silent Night? Well, we know Oh Come, All Ye Faithful. Top that, Fritz. Except, without the actual competition and with a lot more mud. The air was still, cold, and crisp, perfectly carrying the sound. It was as if the very atmosphere was cooperating, allowing this impossible exchange to take place. The usual crackle of gunfire, the distant thud of shells, the incessant, nerve-jangling symphony of war had been momentarily replaced by something utterly alien. It was the sound of humanity, raw and unvarnished, cutting through the manufactured hatred. You closed your eyes for a moment, letting the music wash over you. It was a lullaby for the battlefield, a temporary balm for souls weary of slaughter. It was a reminder that beneath the uniforms, the propaganda, and the orders there were just people. People who loved Christmas, who missed their homes, and who perhaps deep down didn't really want to be here, trying to kill other people. The silence that had preceded the carols had been eerie. The carols themselves, though beautiful, were almost more so. They were a challenge to everything you thought you knew about this war, about the enemy, about yourself. They were a whisper of a different possibility, a fleeting glimpse of a world where barbed wire fences were replaced by bridges of song. And as the last notes of a German verse faded, replaced by the tentative opening of an English one, you felt an undeniable pull, a strange magnetic force drawing you towards the impossible light flickering in the darkness across no man's land. A shiver, not entirely from the biting cold, traces its way down your spine. The carol, so impossibly clear just moments ago, now seems to hang in the frigid air, a ghost of sound. Your breath plumes in the darkness, a white flag against the black canvas of the night. This stillness, this lack of the usual, terrifying cacophony of war, is far more unnerving than any barrage. It's the sound of a record player suddenly stopping mid-song, leaving an echoing silence that screams louder than any music. You slowly, carefully begin to rise. Every muscle protests, stiff from the cold and the constant tension, but a powerful, almost magnetic curiosity pulls you upward. It's an act of sheer madness, really. Peering over the parapet, that flimsy barrier of sandbags and earth that typically offers the barest illusion of safety, is usually a death wish. It's like peeking over the edge of a cliff, knowing full well there's nothing but a long, painful drop awaiting you. But tonight, something is different. Tonight, the air doesn't hum with the unseen menace of snipers or the whistling prelude of incoming shells. It holds only the lingering scent of damp earth and the faint, sweet memory of a carol. Your eyes, accustomed to the inky blackness of no man's land, strain to adjust. The moon, a sliver of silver light, casts long, distorted shadows across the frozen, churned-up mud. And then you see them. Flickering lights. Not the blinding flashes of gunfire, nor the cold, sterile glow of flares, but something softer, warmer. Small, bobbing pinpricks of light, like fireflies caught in a strange, terrible dream. They dance along the enemy trench line, little stars against the dark horizon, each one a tiny beacon of an impossible peace. Are they candles? Lanterns? Little Christmas trees, perhaps? It's a thought so absurd, so utterly out of place in this landscape of desolation, that you almost laugh. You know, the kind of laugh that's half giggle, half nervous breakdown. And then the voices. Muffled, indistinct at first, but undeniably there. A murmur, a low hum of conversation, punctuated by the occasional burst of laughter. Laughter. In their trench. The same trench from which bullets have whizzed past your ears, from which shouts of Achtung have preceded a rush across the wire. It's like finding out your mortal enemy in a superhero movie is actually just a really chill dude who spends his evenings knitting tiny sweaters for rescued kittens. It just doesn't compute. You lean a fraction closer, your cheek pressing against the cold, damp sandbags. The earth smells of decay and frost, a scent that's become as familiar as your own breath. But tonight, mingling with it, there's a faint wisp of wood smoke, and something else, something savory. Is that cooking? Are they having a Christmas dinner over there? While you're gnawing on another piece of hardtack. The injustice. Oh, the humanity. Or perhaps more accurately, the inhumanity of your own rations. The sheer surrealism of the moment washes over you, a wave of disorienting calm. This is Christmas Eve, 1914. For months, you've been locked in a brutal, static war, a stalemate of mud and blood. The enemy has been an abstract concept, a faceless threat. You've been told they're barbarians, Huns, monsters. Yet here they are, singing familiar carols and, by the sound of it, having a surprisingly convivial time. It's a stark reminder that the Christmas Truce, while often romanticized as a single, unified event, was in fact a series of spontaneous, localized ceasefires that broke out independently along various sectors of the Western Front, sometimes involving entire battalions, sometimes just a few men in a quiet corner. It wasn't centrally planned. It was an organic eruption of shared humanity. Your mind races, trying to reconcile the conflicting realities. Is this a trap? A clever ruse to lure you out into the open? The propaganda machine has drilled into you the cunning and ruthlessness of the enemy. You've heard the stories, seen the posters. But the sound of Stille Nacht, drifting across the no man's land, doesn't exactly scream devious ambush. It sounds peaceful, almost vulnerable. You find yourself doing something you haven't done in months, truly looking at the enemy trench, not as a target, but as a place where other men, just like you, exist. You notice the makeshift chimneys poking out from dugouts, the faint outlines of their barbed wire, the way the moonlight glints off something metallic. A helmet, perhaps, or a bayonet, but rendered harmless by the context of carols and quiet chatter. It's like observing a bizarre, silent play unfolding on a stage where the actors are supposed to be your sworn enemies. A particularly strong gust of wind carries a snippet of conversation, too faint to understand, but the tone is unmistakably light, even jovial. It's not the sharp, clipped commands of officers, nor the desperate cries of the wounded. It's the sound of normal people, enjoying a moment of respite. And you realize, with a jolt, that this is what peace sounds like. This quiet murmur, this gentle laughter, this shared, unspoken understanding that for one night, the madness might just pause. You're grappling with a notion so radical, so profoundly unsettling in its simplicity, that it makes your head spin. The idea of peace. Here. Now. In this crucible of war. It's like someone just told you that gravity has decided to take a holiday. You know it's impossible, but the evidence of your senses is screaming otherwise. Historians still debate the extent to which these localized truces were truly spontaneous, or if a pre-existing, unspoken understanding between frontline troops, tired of the constant attrition and sharing the same miserable conditions, contributed to their widespread nature. Was it a collective sigh of exhaustion, a primal human need for a break from the horror, or something more? As you peer into the darkness, you can't help but feel it's the latter. A shared, unspoken weariness that transcends national borders and propaganda. There's a strange, almost voyeuristic quality to this observation. You're an unseen audience member to a performance you never expected to witness. You imagine them over there, huddled around a small fire, perhaps sharing a meager Christmas ration, just as you would be if you were back home. The thought is both comforting and deeply disturbing. Comforting because it reminds you of home, of humanity. Disturbing because it shatters the carefully constructed illusion of the enemy as something less than human. You recall a curious detail you once heard, a quirky tidbit from a soldier's account. Some German soldiers were said to have placed small, decorated fir trees, complete with lit candles, atop their trenches, turning the desolate landscape into something resembling a bizarre frontline Christmas display. You crane your neck, trying to spot one, a tiny, defiant beacon against the encroaching darkness. You don't see a full tree, but those flickering lights, could they be candles on small branches? The thought is almost too whimsical for this grim reality. It's like finding a unicorn grazing in a landfill. The air grows colder, biting at your exposed skin, but you remain transfixed. The weight of your rifle, usually a comforting presence, now feels heavy and alien. It's a tool of war, and war, for this fleeting moment, seems to have vanished. The very ground beneath you, usually scarred by shell holes and littered with the debris of conflict, feels different. Quieter. Expectant. The voices from the enemy trench seem to grow a little clearer, a little closer. You can almost make out individual words, though they're in a language you don't understand. But the tone is universal. It's the tone of people relaxing, of people finding solace in each other's company. It's the sound of humanity, stripped bare of its uniform, its flag, its orders. It's just people, and you, peering over the parapet, are just another person watching them, grappling with the profound, unsettling, utterly surreal notion that peace, even if just for a few hours, has decided to pay a surprise visit to the most unlikely of places. And you're just a witness to its quiet, impossible arrival. The single carol, that impossible sound, hangs in the air like a fragile, crystalline ornament. It's so delicate, so out of place, you almost expect it to shatter. But it doesn't. Instead, it seems to gain strength, to thicken, as if more voices, tentative at first, then bolder, are joining in from the opposing trench. From the German lines, you hear it now clearer, stronger, the unmistakable melody of Stille Nacht, Heilige Nacht. Silent night, holy night, and you realize, with a jolt that travels right through your frozen boots, that this isn't just one lone, brave soul. This is a chorus. It's a sound that cuts through the biting cold, through the lingering scent of damp earth and stale smoke, through the very fabric of war itself. It's not a command. It's not a threat. It's just singing. And then, from your own trench, a hesitant murmur begins. A few voices, then more, picking up the English words, the familiar rhythm of Silent Night. It's almost as if an invisible conductor has just tapped his baton on the frosty air, signaling a truly bizarre, spontaneous choir practice across no man's land. You might even find yourself humming along, a low, almost unconscious rumble in your own throat, a quiet defiance of the grim reality surrounding you. The sound swells, a strange, beautiful, and utterly surreal duet. German voices, deep and resonant, intertwining with the higher, perhaps slightly less disciplined, English tones. Let's be honest, not every soldier was a choir boy, and there were probably a few notes in there that would make a professional singer wince. But tonight, perfection wasn't the point, was it? It was the effort. You can almost picture the breath pluming from their mouths, just as it does from yours, turning the familiar carols into visible clouds of shared humanity. It's an impromptu concert, the like of which the world has surely never seen before, nor likely will again. Imagine, if you will, the world's most exclusive and least comfortable concert hall. The seats are muddy, the air conditioning is set to Arctic blast, and the dress code is whatever you managed to survive the last few days in. Yet, the acoustics, surprisingly, are rather good across the open, flat expanse. The sound carries, unimpeded by anything but the vast, empty space that usually separates life from death. The Germans finish Stille Nacht, and for a beat there's a hush. A collective intake of breath, perhaps, on both sides. Then, from your own lines, a new song begins to rise. "O come, all ye faithful." And this time, a truly remarkable thing happens. The German voices, after a moment of what you can only imagine is pleased surprise, begin to join in. Not with the English words, of course, but with the Latin translation, Adest Fideles. It's an ancient melody, a shared cultural touchstone, reaching across the chasm of conflict. This is a mainstream historical fact. These very carols, particularly Stille Nacht and Adest Fideles, "O come, all ye faithful," were indeed among the most frequently reported songs exchanged during the truce, creating an almost universal language of peace. You really listen, to the way the different languages weave together. It's not perfect, certainly. There are stumbles, moments where one side might finish a phrase slightly ahead of the other, or where a German tenor might hit a note that an English baritone wasn't expecting. But it's not about precision. It's about presence. It's about the sheer, undeniable fact that they are there, and you are here, and for this fleeting moment, you are singing the same song. It's a quiet, profound act of rebellion against the noise and chaos that usually defines your existence here. The air itself seems to hum with this unusual energy. It's as if the very atoms of the atmosphere are vibrating with a shared, unspoken understanding. You find yourself leaning slightly closer to the parapet, not out of caution, but out of a desperate need to absorb every note, every nuance of this impossible symphony. It's the kind of moment that makes you pinch yourself, just to ensure you haven't finally succumbed to some strange, trench-induced fever dream. Is this really happening? Are you really listening to the enemy sing Christmas carols with you? It feels less like war, and more like a particularly bizarre, yet strangely comforting holiday party where you accidentally invited people who speak a different language, but everyone still knows the words to the classics. This shared singing, this blend of German hymns and English carols, truly becomes an unspoken conversation. It's a dialogue conducted not with words, but with shared melodies, with a collective recognition of something beautiful and sacred that transcends the uniforms and the flags. Each note is a question, and each harmonizing voice is an answer. It asks, "Are you there?" And it answers, "Yes, we are here." It asks, "Do you feel this too?" And it answers, "Yes, we feel it." It asks, "Can we just stop for a moment?" And it answers, "Yes, for now we can." Think about it. These men, who just hours ago were trying to kill each other, are now engaged in a spontaneous, international caroling competition. Or perhaps, more accurately, a collaboration. It's like a very slow, very cold, very muddy version of a modern-day carpool karaoke. But instead of a celebrity, you've got thousands of tired, cold soldiers, and instead of a car, you've got miles of barbed wire and frozen earth. The stakes, however, are considerably higher than who hits the best high note. There's a strange, almost ethereal quality to the sound as it drifts across the barren wasteland. The ground here, usually churned into a pockmarked moonscape by shellfire, seems to absorb the sound, holding it, amplifying it in its own grim way. The barbed wire, usually a symbol of impassable division, seems to shimmer faintly in the moonlight, perhaps even vibrating slightly with the low hum of the combined voices. The scattered debris of battle, a broken rifle, a discarded helmet, lies silent, as if even the remnants of war are pausing to listen. This wasn't just a handful of men, it was a widespread phenomenon. While not every sector of the Western Front saw a truce, the singing was a common precursor where it did occur. And it often involved surprising levels of participation. Some accounts even mention soldiers who, before the war, might have had a smattering of German or English from school or from working abroad, allowing them to pick up phrases or even entire verses of the opposing side's carols. This quirky or fringe tidbit suggests a deeper connection existed even before the war, a kind of cultural osmosis that now, ironically, served to bridge the gap in the most unexpected way. Imagine a German soldier remembering a phrase from a British folk song he heard on a pre-war holiday to London, now finding himself singing Silent Night and hearing his enemy respond in turn. It's the kind of thing that makes you wonder if peace isn't just a political aspiration, but a deeply ingrained human impulse, just waiting for the right melody to trigger it. The singing continues, ebbing and flowing, sometimes one side louder, sometimes the other. It's not just carols now. You catch snippets of German folk songs, perhaps a melancholic tune that speaks of home and hearth. And your own comrades respond with their own familiar tunes, not always Christmas-themed, but songs that carry the weight of shared experience, of longing, of a life beyond the trench. It's a testament to the power of music, isn't it? How it can bypass the logical, language-processing parts of the brain and go straight for the emotional core. It's like a direct download of feeling, no translation app required. Historians still debate the true extent to which these shared carols truly fostered a lasting sense of mutual understanding beyond that single, extraordinary night. Was it just a temporary lull, a holiday anomaly, or did it plant a seed of something deeper that perhaps made it harder, even for a moment, to view the man across the way as simply the enemy? As you stand there, shivering, but with a warmth spreading through your chest that has nothing to do with your threadbare greatcoat, you can't help but feel it's the latter. This isn't just a ceasefire. It feels like a momentary suspension of disbelief, a collective agreement to remember what it means to be human. The quiet, mundane conversations of the Christmas Truce haven't even begun yet, but this shared silent song is the overture. It's the breaking of the ice, literally and figuratively. It's the moment when the abstract concept of the enemy begins to dissolve, replaced by the very real, very human sound of voices, just like yours, singing in the cold. It's a sound that whispers promises of something more, something profoundly different from the usual symphony of destruction. And as the last notes of a German carol, perhaps Es ist ein Rose entsprungen, lo, how a rose air blooming, fade into the crisp night air, you find yourself holding your breath, waiting for what impossible sound might follow. The silence that settles after the singing isn't the usual tense, watchful silence of the front line. It's a different kind of quiet, a quiet filled with anticipation, a quiet that hums with the echo of shared humanity, a quiet that feels, for the first time in a very long time, almost peaceful. The impossible happens. From the shadowy, jagged line of the opposing trench, figures begin to emerge. It's not a charge, not a surrender, not even a reconnaissance patrol. It's something else. You crane your neck, squinting through the residual chill of the pre-dawn air, your breath misting in front of your face. One, then two, then a scattering of men, clad in their distinctive Feldgrau uniforms, slowly, hesitantly, clamber out of their defensive positions. They move with an almost agonizing slowness, as if testing the very fabric of reality with each footfall. It's like watching a scene from a dream, or perhaps, more accurately, a nightmare you hadn't even conceived of. Your rifle, still cold and heavy in your hands, feels utterly alien in this moment. The silence, which had been profound just moments ago, now feels impossibly vast, amplifying the soft, almost imperceptible crunch of their boots on the frozen, churned-up earth of no man's land. This ground, usually a deadly, pockmarked expanse where every movement risks a sniper's bullet or an artillery shell, is now being trod upon by the very men you are sworn to kill. It's less no man's land, and more everyone's awkward family gathering spot, all of a sudden. You briefly wonder if they're offering a subscription service for peace, but quickly dismiss the thought. This isn't the future, after all. You watch, transfixed, as they take their first few steps into the open. Their movements are tentative, almost balletic in their caution. They don't rush, they don't shout, they simply step. Each man seems to be looking around, as disbelieving as you feel. Some hold their hands up, empty and open, a universal sign of peaceful intent. Others carry small, dark objects that you can't quite discern in the dim light. Are they weapons? No, they seem too small, too gentle. One man, taller than the others, raises an arm and slowly, deliberately waves. It's not a grand, theatrical gesture, but a small, almost shy flick of the wrist, a hesitant invitation hanging in the crisp morning air. Your heart thumps a rhythm against your ribs that feels oddly out of sync with the stillness around you. It's the kind of situation your drill sergeant specifically warned you against, probably right after the lecture on not losing your rifle or forgetting your bayonet. Fraternizing with the enemy wasn't even on the list because it was just that unthinkable. Yet, here it is, unfolding before your very eyes. You can almost hear the collective gasp of your ancestors, spinning in their graves at the sheer audacity of it all. The beckoning gesture, though subtle, is unmistakable. It's directed at you, at your line, at the British and French and Belgian soldiers huddled in their own trenches. It's an invitation to step out of the shadows, out of the war, and into this fragile, utterly surreal moment. A ripple of murmuring spreads through your trench. Some men are raising their rifles, instincts kicking in, but others are simply staring, their faces a mixture of fear, bewilderment, and a nascent, dangerous curiosity. You find yourself doing the same. Your hand, still gripping your rifle, feels strangely numb. Your eyes scan the faces of the Germans. They look young. Some wear thick, bristly mustaches, others have clean-shaven, boyish faces. They look tired, cold, perhaps even as bewildered as you are. Their uniforms, usually so imposing in their efficiency, now seem merely practical, worn by men who are just as weary of this endless, muddy existence as you are. You notice a faint glimmer on one man's helmet, reflecting the distant, pale light of the rising sun. It's just a helmet, just a man, not the faceless enemy you've been conditioned to hate. You recall the stories, hushed and disbelieving, that had filtered down the line in the past few days. Whispers of unofficial truces in other sectors, fleeting moments where the fighting simply stopped. But those were just rumors, surely? Battlefield folklore, designed to give a sliver of hope in the overwhelming despair. Yet, here it is, happening directly in front of you. This isn't a rumor, it's a silent, undeniable truth unfolding in the gray light of Christmas morning. Mainstream historical fact asterisk, while often romanticized as a universal event, the Christmas Truce was not a single, coordinated ceasefire. It occurred in various localized sectors along the Western Front, particularly where trenches were close and fighting had been less intense, and often initiated by the soldiers themselves. Some estimates suggest that up to two-thirds of the British line participated in some form of truce or cessation of hostilities during that Christmas. It was a patchwork of localized, spontaneous ceasefires, not a grand, official declaration. The singing from moments ago has faded, replaced by an even more profound quiet. The air is still frigid, biting at your exposed skin, but a new kind of warmth, a strange, unsettling warmth, begins to spread through your chest. It's the warmth of curiosity, of a desperate, forbidden hope. You half expect a referee to blow a whistle and declare a penalty for unsportsmanlike conduct on the battlefield, but then remember this isn't a game, even if it feels like one where everyone's forgotten the rules. One of the German soldiers, the one who first waved, takes another hesitant step forward. He's carrying something now, something small and green. As he gets a little closer, you realize what it is, a small, decorated Christmas tree, no taller than his waist, adorned with what look like tiny candles. Quirky tidbit asterisk accounts from the time confirm that German soldiers, perhaps more accustomed to the tradition of decorated evergreen trees for Christmas, sometimes brought these small trees to their parapets as a visible sign of their festive intentions, a bizarre beacon of peace in the desolate landscape. It's a detail so utterly out of place that it jolts you. A Christmas tree, in no man's land. It's almost comical, if it weren't so incredibly poignant. Your gaze drifts from the tree back to the man's face. He offers a tentative, almost shy smile, a fleeting expression of shared humanity that cuts through the years of propaganda and hatred. He says something, a guttural sound that you don't understand, but his tone is soft, inviting. He extends a hand, not in aggression, but in open invitation. Open scholarly debate phrase asterisk historians still argue whether the Christmas Truce was primarily a spontaneous grassroots movement among the common soldiers, weary of war and yearning for a moment of peace, or if it was more influenced by the temporary cessation of official hostilities for the holiday, with junior officers often playing a key role in facilitating it, sometimes against higher command's wishes. Was it a bottom-up surge of humanity, or a top-down, albeit unofficial, recognition of the holiday? In this moment, watching this man with his tiny tree, it feels utterly, profoundly grassroots. The decision is yours. Every fiber of your being screams caution, screams trap. But something else, something deeper and more primal, whispers opportunity. It's the opportunity to breathe, to be human, if only for a few impossible minutes. You look at the faces of your comrades. Some are still frozen in disbelief. Others, however, are beginning to stir, a slow, collective movement towards the parapet, a shared inclination towards the absurd, the miraculous. You see the same question in their eyes that burns in yours. Is this real? Can we trust it? Can we afford not to? The cold wind whips around you, but for the first time in months, it doesn't feel like the breath of death, but merely the chill of a winter morning. And then, without conscious thought, you find yourself taking a step. You find yourself crossing the last few feet of no man's land, each step on the frozen, churned-up earth feeling impossibly heavy, yet impossibly light. The air, still sharp with the bite of winter, hums with an almost unbearable tension, a silence deeper than any you've known since the war began. It's a silence that usually precedes a barrage, but this time, it's pregnant with something else entirely, a fragile, almost sacred anticipation. You can feel your breath misting in front of you, a tiny, fleeting cloud of warmth in the vast, cold expanse. Your eyes, accustomed to scanning for threats, now search for something else, recognition, perhaps, or simply humanity. As you draw closer, the figures from the opposing trench become clearer, no longer just shadowy shapes, but distinct individuals. You see the rough texture of their gray-green uniforms, the glint of a buckle, the steam rising from their mouths as they breathe. They look surprisingly normal. Just men. Like you. A strange thought to have about people you were, moments ago, prepared to kill, and who were, presumably, prepared to do the same to you. It's like that moment when you meet someone in person after only knowing them from their rather aggressive online comments. Suddenly, they have a face, and it complicates things. One figure, slightly taller than the rest, steps forward a pace or two, his breath pluming around him like a tiny, personal cloud. He has a fair, almost boyish face, framed by the rigid lines of his pickelhaube helmet. For a moment, you just stand there, an awkward tableau in the middle of a war zone. It's not quite like swiping right on a dating app, but in its own way, it was an incredibly bold first move, beckoning you into this utterly unprecedented social encounter. You wonder what his comrades are thinking, and then you wonder what your comrades are thinking, watching from the lip of your own trench. Probably a mix of awe, disbelief, and a quiet, nervous hope. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, his right hand begins to rise. It's a deliberate, unhurried motion, as if he's testing the very fabric of reality. Your own hand, as if guided by an unseen force, begins to mirror his. It feels clumsy, alien. This isn't the practiced motion of saluting a superior or the quick grip of a comrade in arms. This is different. Your fingers, usually wrapped around a cold rifle, are now reaching out into the unknown, towards someone who, by all official definitions, should be your mortal enemy. The cold air prickles your skin, but a different kind of shiver runs down your spine, one of profound, almost dizzying unreality. His hand meets yours. The contact is firm, surprisingly warm, given the frosty air. You feel the rough texture of his wool glove, the subtle pressure of his grip. It's a simple handshake, the kind you've performed countless times, with friends, with new acquaintances, with distant relatives at Christmas gatherings. Yet, this one carries the weight of an entire world. It's a gesture that, in any other context, would be utterly mundane, but here, in this desolate, shell-scarred landscape, it is nothing short of revolutionary. It's the quiet, almost unheard, sound of a dam beginning to crack. A tentative smile creases his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. It's not a broad, joyous grin, but a small, hesitant curve of the lips, a flicker of shared humanity. You feel your own lips respond, a mirror image of his uncertain hope. There's no booming laughter, no triumphant cheer, just this quiet, almost fragile acknowledgement. It's a smile that says, "We shouldn't be doing this, but here we are." And you find yourself thinking, yes, here we are. What in the blazes happens next? Then a voice, soft and slightly accented, breaks the profound silence. "Merry Christmas," he says, the words a little clumsy but utterly clear. You blink. The sheer simplicity of it is disarming. No threats, no boasts, just a universal greeting of goodwill. You find your own voice, surprisingly steady, replying, "Merry Christmas to you too." You might even add a slightly more formal, Guten Tag, remembering a phrase from a schoolboy German lesson, hoping it lands correctly and doesn't accidentally insult his grandmother. It's a very British thing to worry about social etiquette even when standing in the middle of a battlefield, shaking hands with the enemy. Suddenly, the tension that had been a tight knot in your stomach begins to loosen, just a fraction. This isn't a trick. This isn't a trap. This is a real. You see the same dawning realization in the eyes of the German soldiers behind him, and in the faces of your own comrades now cautiously emerging from your trench. It's a collective exhale, a shared sigh of disbelief and relief. This simple handshake, this exchange of two small, universally understood phrases, has opened a door that everyone believed was permanently sealed shut by the brutal realities of war. Historians still argue whether this widespread, spontaneous ceasefire was a testament to shared humanity, or merely a pragmatic, temporary respite from an otherwise unbearable existence. Perhaps it was both. For you, standing there, feeling the warmth of that gloved hand, it feels like something more profound than pragmatism. It feels like a quiet defiance of everything you've been told, everything you've been trained for. It's an act of almost absurd optimism in the face of overwhelming despair. You're not just shaking a hand, you're shaking the very foundations of the conflict, if only for a few precious hours. You notice the small details of his uniform now that you're so close. The quality of the stitching, the type of buttons. You recall a story you heard from a very excited quartermaster once, about how German uniforms were surprisingly well made, which, if true, was a bit annoying given the quality of some of the kit you'd been issued. But here, it's just an observation, a mundane detail that grounds this surreal moment in a strange, shared reality. It's a quirky little tidbit that sticks in your mind, the unexpected quality of the enemy's haberdashery. More hands reach out, both yours and theirs. The handshake spreads, a ripple effect through the small gathering. One of your sergeants, a gruff man who usually reserves his smiles for a good cup of tea, finds himself clasping the hand of a German corporal, a look of utter bewilderment, mixed with a hint of a grin on his face. It's a chain reaction of tentative smiles and mumbled greetings, a silent agreement passing between men who, just hours before, were trying to end each other's lives. The sheer scale of this impromptu truce across the Western Front, involving tens of thousands of soldiers in various sectors, is a mainstream historical fact that still boggles the mind, a grassroots movement of peace in the heart of total war. The air begins to hum with the low murmur of voices, a mix of English and German, punctuated by the occasional shared, nervous chuckle. It's not yet a full conversation, more like a collection of hesitant attempts at communication, a fumbling for common ground. But the handshake, that first, simple, audacious gesture, has broken the ice. It has marked an unbelievable beginning to an unlikely truce, proving that even in the bleakest of circumstances, a moment of shared humanity can emerge from the mud and the frost, whispering a quiet message of hope. The air, still crisp with the bite of a December night, seems to hold its breath around you. Your hand, calloused and grimy from weeks of clutching a rifle and digging through mud, instinctively fumbles inside your tunic. You feel the familiar, slightly damp, crinkle of a cigarette packet. It's a miracle it's even survived this long, let alone in a condition where its contents are still remotely smokable. Most of your tobacco, if you were honest, had long ago turned into a damp, clumpy mess, fit only for a very sad, very desperate pipe. But this feels different. It's a small, almost reverent square of paper and foil, cradling a few precious, cylindrical sticks of comfort. You pull out the packet, a brand you've come to know intimately, perhaps a capstan or a woodbine, their faded colors a testament to their journey through the trenches. The paper is soft beneath your thumb, the edges worn smooth. You extract a single cigarette, holding it between your thumb and forefinger. It's not just a cigarette, it's a moment. A tiny, rolled-up promise of warmth and a brief escape from the gnawing chill that seems to permeate your very bones. You look at the German soldier standing before you, the one who had just offered that tentative, astonishing handshake. His face is a mosaic of youth and weariness, much like your own. His eyes, though, hold a flicker of curiosity, a mirroring of the disbelief that must surely be etched on your own features. You extend your hand, offering the cigarette. It's a simple gesture, one you've made 1,000 times to your mates in the trench, a silent invitation to share a moment, a tiny indulgence. But here, in this desolate, shell-scarred landscape, offered to a man who moments ago was your designated enemy, it feels monumental. Your arm feels heavy, almost as if the very air resists this act of unexpected kindness. You watch his gaze fall upon the cigarette, then flick back up to meet your eyes. There's a moment of hesitation, a flicker of suspicion, perhaps, or just plain bewilderment. Can he trust this? Is it a trick? The thought hangs in the air, thick and unspoken. But then a slow, almost imperceptible nod. A tiny crease appears at the corner of his eye as he reaches out, his fingers surprisingly gentle as they take the cigarette from your grasp. You notice the rough texture of his uniform sleeve, the faint smell of damp wool, and something vaguely antiseptic, a scent common to all soldiers, regardless of their uniform. He holds the cigarette, turning it over in his fingers, examining it with a quiet reverence. It's a British cigarette, clearly, different from the German brands he's accustomed to, perhaps a Juno or a Salem. You wonder if he's ever smoked one before. Probably not, given the circumstances. It's not exactly a common trade item across no man's land. You pull out your own cigarette, fumbling a bit with the damp paper as you try to get it out. This is where a little bit of trench ingenuity comes into play. You reach into another pocket, pulling out a small, battered tin, inside which a few precious matches rattle. You strike one against the sole of your boot, the sudden flare of light illuminating both your faces in the dim twilight. The flame dances, a tiny, fragile beacon in the vast, encroaching darkness. You cup your hand around it, shielding it from the faint breeze, and offer the light to him first. He leans in, his face close enough now that you can see the faint stubble on his chin, the smudges of dirt that seem permanently ingrained in his skin. He draws in a breath, and the tip of the cigarette glows orange, a tiny, perfect ember. A soft plume of smoke curls upwards, dissipating quickly into the cold air. Then, you light your own, the familiar, slightly harsh taste of the tobacco filling your mouth. It's a comfort, a small, fleeting luxury. You exhale slowly, watching the smoke mingle with his. It's a quiet communion, two men, sharing a breath, sharing a moment, in a place designed for anything but. You glance at him, and he offers a small, almost shy smile. It's not a full, teeth-baring grin, more of a slight upturning of the lips, a silent acknowledgement of the shared absurdity and beauty of this moment. You find yourself returning it, a genuine smile that feels strange and unfamiliar on your face after so many weeks of grim determination. Historians still argue whether the initial exchanges were truly spontaneous across the entire front, or if word of mouth and prior small acts of non-aggression led to the widespread nature of the truce. But here, in this pocket of no man's land, it feels utterly, wonderfully unplanned. The act of sharing a cigarette, a commonplace gesture in civilian life, becomes an act of profound, almost rebellious, defiance against the grim machinery of war. It's a universal language, isn't it? The offering of a small vice, a shared moment of calm. It's like saying, for this moment we are just men, not soldiers, and we can share a quiet puff without trying to kill each other. Honestly, after weeks of hardtack and lukewarm tea, a good cigarette felt like a 5-star meal anyway. You'd probably trade your left boot for a decent smoke, so this felt like a fair exchange, even if nothing was explicitly asked for in return. He takes another slow drag from his cigarette, his eyes scanning the desolate landscape around you, then returning to your face. He reaches a hand inside his own tunic, a mirror of your earlier gesture. Your eyes widen slightly, a ripple of anticipation going through you. What will it be? A German cigarette in return? A piece of chocolate, perhaps, if he's been lucky enough to keep any? You watch as his fingers emerge, not with another consumable, but with something small, metallic, and surprisingly heavy. He holds it out to you, his gaze steady. It's a button. Not just any button either. It's a uniform button, clearly from his own tunic. It's a dull, pewter-gray color, with a raised design that you can just make out in the fading light, perhaps the Prussian eagle or a regimental crest. It's still attached to a tiny, frayed scrap of dark green wool, a testament to where it had just been. He must have snipped it off, or perhaps it was already loose. You take it from him, your fingers brushing against his. The metal is cool and smooth against your palm, surprisingly weighty for its size. You turn it over, examining the back, noting the 2 small holes where the thread once held it fast to its fabric home. A button. It's such a small, mundane thing, isn't it? Almost inconsequential. And yet, in this context, it feels incredibly significant. It's not a consumable. It's not something that will disappear in a puff of smoke or a bite of food. It's a piece of his uniform, a piece of his identity as a soldier, offered to you. It's a token, a physical manifestation of this impossible, fleeting comradeship. You imagine him, perhaps in the quiet of his trench, deciding which button to part with, knowing it would be a permanent loss from his uniform. You wonder if he has a spare, or if his tunic will now forever bear a small, telltale gap. It's a genuinely quirky tidbit of the truce, isn't it? Men literally unbuttoning themselves to create a bond. It's a bit like giving someone your shoelace in exchange for a handshake, utterly illogical, yet deeply personal. You hold the button, turning it over and over in your fingers. It's not valuable in any material sense, not like a watch or a pen. But its value here now is immeasurable. It's a tangible symbol of a moment that defies belief, a small, metal anchor in the swirling chaos of war. You look up at him again, and this time, there's no hesitation in your smile. It's a wide, genuine grin, one that reaches your eyes and crinkles them at the corners. You don't need words. The button speaks volumes. It says, I see you not as an enemy but as a man. It says, this moment matters. The cigarette still burns between your fingers, its smoke a thin, ghostly column against the darkening sky. The button feels solid and real in your other hand, a quiet counterpoint to the ephemeral smoke. It's a bizarre, beautiful exchange, isn't it? A puff of smoke for a piece of metal. It feels like something out of a dream, or perhaps a very strange, very quiet play. You could almost hear a director offstage whispering, "More profound silence, please." You slip the button into your tunic pocket, the same pocket where your own remaining cigarettes lie. It feels right, keeping it close. It's a secret, a small, personal treasure from a day that will surely be remembered, whether anyone believes your stories or not. This tiny, cold piece of metal is proof. Proof that for a few precious hours the war, with all its brutal logic, had been momentarily suspended. Proof that humanity, in its quiet, persistent way, can still find a way to bloom in the most unlikely of soils, even in the muddy, blood-soaked fields of no man's land. So you've done it. You've shaken hands. Your palm, rough and cold from the damp trench air, meets theirs equally calloused. A moment of tentative, almost unbelievable human contact. And then silence. Not the eerie, tense silence of no man's land pre-truce, but a new kind of quiet. A quiet filled with the unspoken question. Now what? You stand there, a little awkward, a little unsure, a smile plastered on your face that feels both genuine and utterly ridiculous given the circumstances. It's like being introduced to someone fascinating at a party, only to realize you don't speak a single word of the same language. You know, that moment where you both just sort of nod and make vague, polite noises until someone else mercifully intervenes. Except here, there's no one else. Just you, them, and the vast, muddy expanse of what was moments ago a killing field. As the quiet murmuring continues, the topics drift further, like leaves carried on a gentle stream. From the immediate discomforts of the trenches, the chatter meanders into the lives they led before this colossal disruption. What did you do before all this? You ask another German, a man with kind eyes and a neatly trimmed mustache. He hesitates, then smiles faintly. I was a baker, a master baker, in a small town near Munich. My family, they have had the bakery for 3 generations. His voice is soft, almost wistful. I miss the smell of fresh bread in the morning, the warmth of the ovens. You imagine the scene, flour dusting his apron, the rhythmic kneading of dough, the sweet scent of rising yeast. It's a world away from the acrid smell of gunpowder and the chill of the mud. You share your own story. I was a clerk in a solicitor's office in London. Not quite as romantic as baking, I suppose. Mostly filing papers and making tea. You shrug, a small, self-deprecating smile on your lips. But I had a small garden, grew roses, and I liked going to the football matches on Saturdays. The thought of a quiet garden, of the roar of a crowd in a stadium, feels impossibly distant, like a dream from another lifetime. This is the truly surprising normalcy of the moment. Men who, just hours before, were trying to kill each other, now discussing their civilian lives, their hobbies, their mundane routines. You discover that Klaus, the one who complained about the cold, was a carpenter, good with his hands, building furniture. Another German, a younger lad with bright, eager eyes, was still a student, studying engineering, dreaming of bridges and buildings. One of your own comrades, a burly Scot named Hamish, reveals he was a coal miner, accustomed to darkness and confined spaces, though he admits the trenches offer a different kind of claustrophobia. At least down the pit, you knew where the roof was, he grumbles good-naturedly. You talk about families, but not in the yearning, emotional way of before. Now it's about the everyday. A brother who was a keen cyclist, a sister who played the piano beautifully, a father who was terribly particular about his Sunday roast. You learn that the German baker had a daughter who was just starting school, and he frets about whether she's learning her letters properly. You mention your younger brother, who is always getting into scrapes, and wonder if he's still driving your mother mad. It's these small, intimate details, the threads of ordinary life, that weave a tapestry of shared humanity. It highlights the profound absurdity of the war itself. These are not monstrous enemies, but men with lives, hopes, and frustrations as ordinary as your own. They worry about the price of eggs, or whether their favorite football team will win the league, or if their new boots will last through the winter. It's a quirky tidbit of human nature, how quickly the trivial can reassert itself even in the face of the monumental. Here, in no man's land, surrounded by the ghosts of conflict, you are discussing the merits of different types of beer, or the best way to mend a leaky roof. It's a bizarre, beautiful anomaly. The conversation ebbs and flows, a quiet current of normalcy in a sea of madness. You find yourself listening, truly listening, to the cadences of their voices, the slight differences in their accents, the shared sighs over a particularly tough winter, or the simple joy in remembering a good meal. There's a quiet empathy that grows with each shared anecdote, each mundane detail. It's a powerful, almost overwhelming feeling of connection, forged not in grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but in the simple act of talking about the weather, about food, about the quiet, ordinary lives they led before the world went mad. This is what it comes down to, you realize, as the gentle murmur of voices continues around you. Not the grand narratives of nations, but the small, personal stories of individuals. And in those stories, you find a reflection of your own. As the quiet hum of shared stories began to fade, a new kind of offering emerged, one that spoke a universal language even more eloquently than a photograph. You find yourself reaching into your pack, your fingers brushing against the familiar, slightly greasy paper wrapping of a Christmas treat. It's a piece of plum pudding, sent from home, carefully preserved through mud and skirmishes, a tiny, dark beacon of festive normalcy. You hadn't dared to eat it before, saving it for a moment that never seemed to arrive, or perhaps, a moment you never truly believed would. But here, now, in this absurd, beautiful no-man's land, surrounded by the very men you were supposed to be fighting, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. You unwrap it slowly, the rich, spiced aroma wafting gently on the crisp air. It's a dense, dark mound, studded with dried fruit, a testament to someone's loving hands back home. You hold it out, a silent offering to the German soldier beside you, the one whose eyes crinkled with quiet amusement when you showed him your sister's rather unflattering portrait. He looks at it, a flicker of surprise, then genuine warmth crossing his face. His own hand dips into his pack, emerging with a thick, dark slice of bread. Kammersbrat, you recognize it instantly, a staple of the German military diet, famed for its density and its ability to withstand the rigors of trench life. It looks formidable, almost like a small, edible brick, but there's an honesty to its simplicity. You exchange the items, a silent, almost ritualistic swap. The plum pudding, a taste of English Christmas, for the German rye bread, a slice of their daily sustenance. You take a bite of the Kammersbrat. It's incredibly dense, a serious chew, with a distinct, earthy flavor of rye that coats your tongue. It's not sweet, not soft, but profoundly satisfying in its solidity. It feels honest, and you watch as the German soldier takes a tentative bite of your plum pudding. His eyes widen slightly, a subtle nod of appreciation. The rich, sweet spices, the plump raisins and currants, must be a startling contrast to the more austere flavors of his usual rations. It's a moment of pure, unadulterated culinary diplomacy, and frankly, it's probably the most civilized exchange of goods you've witnessed since arriving on the Western Front. Forget complex treaties and declarations. Sometimes all it takes is a bit of fruitcake and some good, sturdy bread. This simple act, this offering of food, seems to open the floodgates. Others follow suit, rummaging through their packs. A British soldier produces a tin of bully beef, the notorious tinned corned beef that was a staple of the British Army's diet, often sliced and eaten cold, sometimes even fried if a resourceful cook could manage it. It's not exactly a gourmet experience, but in the trenches, it was a protein lifeline. He offers a chunk, its gelatinous texture shimmering slightly in the weak winter light, to a German counterpart. In return, he receives a square of German chocolate, dark and less sweet than the British variety, but undeniably chocolate. You can almost hear the quiet hum of appreciation, a collective, ooh, shiny, from the chocolate-deprived men. Suddenly, this muddy, shell-pocked patch of ground, usually a theater of death, transforms into an impromptu, quiet feast. It's not a lavish spread, mind you. There are no starched tablecloths, no fine china, definitely no sommeliers recommending wine pairings. This is more of a grab what you got and share it with the bloke next to you kind of affair. But the atmosphere is thick with a shared, almost reverent appreciation for these small, unexpected luxuries. The rustle of paper wrappers, the soft clink of tins being opened, the low murmurs of men offering and accepting, all blend into a symphony of quiet contentment. You see a Frenchman, who had somehow found his way into this strange gathering, sharing a piece of hard biscuit, probably a pain de guerre, with a Bavarian. The biscuit is so hard, it looks like it could double as a defensive weapon, but the gesture is soft. The Bavarian offers a gulp from his water bottle in return, a shared sip that speaks volumes. It's a spontaneous potluck, where the only rule is generosity, and the only currency is goodwill. You half expect someone to pull out a tiny, portable espresso machine, or perhaps a miniature fondue set, just to complete the surreal culinary tableau. But alas, the logistical challenges of trench warfare probably didn't allow for such sophisticated catering. The truth is, these Christmas parcels from home, often containing treats like plum pudding, sweets, and tobacco, were absolutely crucial for morale. They were not just food, they were tangible links to the world beyond the trenches, a reminder of family and comfort. This widespread practice of sending Christmas boxes or care packages from home was a significant factor in enabling these specific exchanges during the truce, providing soldiers with items beyond their standard, often monotonous, rations. It wasn't just official supplies. It was personal, heartfelt generosity that fueled these moments. You take another bite of the German bread, chewing slowly. It's a revelation. You'd heard stories, of course, about the German Kommissbrot being incredibly dense, often baked weeks in advance to ensure it lasted. Some soldiers even joked it was so hard it could stop a bullet. But while it's certainly substantial, it's also surprisingly palatable, with a robust flavor that speaks of resilience. It makes you wonder about the logistics of feeding millions of men in a war zone. How do you ensure everyone gets enough, and something that doesn't taste like cardboard? It's a logistical nightmare that makes your own daily quest for a decent cup of tea seem utterly trivial. A British private, a scrawny lad from Leeds, is animatedly trying to explain the finer points of Christmas pudding to a German corporal, using exaggerated gestures and a few broken German words. Pudding. Stern gut. Ja, asterisk Christmas. Family, he says, miming a happy family around a table. The corporal nods, smiling, clearly understanding the sentiment, if not every single word. This simple exchange of food, this act of sharing sustenance, bypasses all the political rhetoric, all the jingoistic songs, all the propaganda. It strips away the uniforms and the national allegiances, revealing just men, hungry and tired, finding common ground in the most basic of human needs. You observe the scene around you, the gentle sounds of chewing, the quiet murmurs, the occasional soft chuckle. It's a far cry from the usual soundtrack of the Western Front, the distant rumble of artillery, the sharp crack of rifle fire, the desperate cries. Here, the loudest sound might be someone unwrapping a biscuit, or the gentle crunch of a hard tack. It's a quietude that feels almost sacred, a fragile bubble of peace in a world gone mad. And it leads you to ponder, as you slowly savor the last crumb of your plum pudding, the deeper implications of this moment. Historians still argue whether the spontaneous sharing of food, beyond its immediate comfort, unconsciously reinforced a shared humanity that made it harder to resume hostilities, or if it was simply a fleeting, isolated act of goodwill in an otherwise brutal conflict. Was it truly transformative, or just a temporary anomaly? You can't say for sure, but for now, in this moment, it feels profound. It feels like a quiet defiance of everything you've been told about the enemy, about the nature of war itself. You notice a German soldier carefully slicing a piece of what looks like cured sausage, offering it around. It's a welcome addition to the somewhat carb-heavy offerings. You take a piece, its salty, savory taste a perfect counterpoint to the sweetness of the pudding. It reminds you of a picnic, perhaps back home, though the backdrop is decidedly less picturesque. No rolling green hills, just churned earth and barbed wire. It's an absurd thought, a picnic in no man's land, but here you are, participating in precisely that. You even manage a light joke, thinking to yourself, well, at least someone's finally catering this war. Though I'm not sure this menu would get rave reviews on Yelp. The generosity isn't just about the food itself, it's about the gesture. It's about the understanding that in a world where everything is scarce, where every bite is precious, to share is an act of profound trust and connection. You see a British soldier, having finished his German chocolate, offer a German a few precious cigarettes. The flicker of gratitude in the German's eyes is unmistakable. Tobacco, like food, was a vital comfort, a small escape from the harsh realities of trench life. It's a simple, universal pleasure, and sharing it feels like sharing a moment of peace. The sun begins its slow descent, casting long, pale shadows across the muddy ground. The feast, if you can call it that, slowly winds down. Bellies are a little fuller, spirits a little lighter. The shared food has done more than just nourish bodies. It has nourished a fleeting sense of camaraderie, a brief, beautiful illusion that these men, on opposite sides of a bloody conflict, were simply people, sharing a meal on a quiet Christmas day. It was a moment of extraordinary, quiet normalcy, a gentle counterpoint to the deafening chaos that usually defined your existence. The quiet murmur of shared stories and the almost sacred act of breaking bread together begin to shift, subtly, almost imperceptibly, into a different kind of exchange. You find yourself observing, then participating, as the very fabric of war seems to unravel in the most unexpected ways. It starts with a glint of metal, a quiet gesture. You see a British soldier, perhaps one of the younger ones, still a bit wide-eyed from the day's surreal events, fumbling with his belt. He unclasps the buckle, its brass dulled by mud and wear, and holds it out towards a German soldier who has been quietly listening to a conversation about London fog. The German, a man with kind eyes and a surprisingly neatly trimmed mustache, looks at the buckle, then back at the young Tommy, a question in his gaze. It's not a challenge, more like a gentle inquiry. The British soldier simply nods, a small, almost shy smile on his face, indicating a desire to trade. And just like that, the first silent transaction of the day begins. You watch as the German reaches into his tunic, pulling out a small, circular object. It's a button, one of those sturdy, four-holed types, likely from his own uniform. He offers it in return. There's no haggling, no negotiation, just a quiet, mutual understanding. The brass buckle, with its faint regimental crest, is exchanged for the plain, gray button. A simple swap, yet in this context, it feels like the most profound act of diplomacy. It's like watching two ancient traders in a silent bazaar, except the currency is something far more precious than gold: shared humanity. You feel a quiet urge, a soft nudge from within, to participate in this impromptu, mud-strewn marketplace of peace. Reaching down, you touch your own belt buckle, considering its weight, its history. But then your fingers drift to the lapel of your greatcoat, where a small, metal badge is pinned. It's a cap badge, actually, from a previous posting, kept as a sentimental token. It's worn, the details softened by time and countless brushes with rough fabric, but it's distinctly yours. You carefully unpin it, the tiny catch releasing with a barely audible click, and hold it out. Across from you, a German soldier older, with lines etched around his eyes that speak of a life lived, not just fought, notices your gesture. He nods slowly, a contemplative look on his face. He doesn't have a cap badge readily available, but he reaches up to his own peaked cap, removing it for a moment, and then, with a deliberate motion, he unstitches a single button from the front of his tunic. It's a uniform button, solid, dark, with a subtle imperial eagle emblem embossed upon it. He offers it to you. The exchange is made. Your cap badge for his button. It feels surprisingly significant, as if you've just traded a piece of your identity for a fragment of his. You hold the button in your palm, feeling its smooth, cool surface, the faint raised design of the eagle a silent testament to a world you were meant to fight, but are now, for this brief, impossible moment, connecting with. It's a bit like getting a rare trading card, if that card also represented a brief ceasefire in a brutal global conflict. Who knew a humble button could hold so much weight? Soon, the quiet bartering becomes more widespread. The sounds are hushed, almost reverent. The soft clink of metal against metal, the rustle of fabric as someone unpins a badge or unstitches a button, the faint whisper of a German Danke or an English cheers, mate. It's a strange symphony of mundane objects, played out on the most extraordinary of stages. You see soldiers trading belt buckles, some plain, some intricately embossed with regimental crests or national symbols. The German buckles, often made of brass or nickel, sometimes feature the God Mit God with us, motto, a phrase that now, in this moment, seems to take on a bewildering new irony. You ponder if God is truly with them, or with you, or perhaps, just perhaps, with both in this moment of shared, quiet defiance. Caps become a hot commodity. A British Tommy might offer his soft, woolen cap, perhaps a bit threadbare, for a German pickelhaube, that iconic spiked helmet, though those are rarer to come by given their bulk. More often, it's the simpler German field caps, the Feldmutzen, exchanged for the British service caps. You watch as a young German, barely more than a boy, beams as he carefully places a muddy but unmistakably British cap on his head, its brim a little too wide for his face. He looks utterly delighted, as if he's just acquired the most valuable treasure on earth. And in a way he has. It's a physical, tangible piece of the enemy, now transformed into a memento of peace. You can almost hear his thoughts. Wait until I show this to my brother back home, assuming I ever get there. Historians still argue whether the items exchanged during the Christmas Truce held any symbolic value beyond their immediate novelty, but standing here, feeling the weight of that German button in your hand, you know it's more than just a souvenir. It's a quiet testament. It's proof. Proof that for one extraordinary day, the lines blurred, and the labels of enemy dissolved into the simple truth of shared humanity. These weren't just soldiers, they were people with families, with hopes, with a strange, universal desire to collect something, anything, from this bizarre experience. The quirky tidbit of it all is that some soldiers, upon returning to their lines, actually tried to use these traded items to prove they had been part of the truce, only to find themselves facing disciplinary action for fraternizing with the enemy. Imagine trying to explain to your stern commanding officer, "Sir, I just wanted a cool souvenir for my mantelpiece. And also world peace, perhaps." It's a bit like getting grounded for bringing a forbidden snack to school, but with much higher stakes. Yet, for now, in no man's land, there are no officers, no rules, just the quiet understanding of men. You find yourself standing amidst a scattering of men, British and German, who just hours ago were locked in a dance of death, and are now, inexplicably, sharing the last embers of daylight. The light itself seems to soften, turning the muddy churned-up earth into shades of bruised purple and muted gray. Breath plumes in the air, a visible sigh from every man, a collective acknowledgement of the moment's passing. There's a strange, almost theatrical quality to it all, as if the stage lights are dimming on a play that, for all its absurdity, you never wanted to end. It's like when you're at a really good party, and someone turns up the house lights, and suddenly you remember that you have to go home and do laundry. Except, instead of laundry, it's back to the whole trying not to get shot thing. A bit of a downgrade, if we're honest. The conversations, which had flowed with surprising ease despite the linguistic gymnastics, begin to falter. Words become fewer, softer, as if each syllable is too heavy to carry the weight of what's coming. You see a German soldier, the one who'd shared his dark bread, fumble in his tunic for a final cigarette, offering it to the private next to him, a shy, almost apologetic gesture. The private takes it, a nod the only response. There's no need for grand pronouncements, no need for a booming voice to declare the end. The air itself is thick with it, a tangible sense of a curtain slowly, inexorably falling. A few men have already begun to drift, almost imperceptibly, back towards their respective lines. It's not a panicked retreat, but a slow, reluctant ebb, like the tide pulling back from the shore. Each step is hesitant, as if hoping that if they walk slowly enough, the sun will just stay. Or perhaps that a benevolent deity will suddenly declare a permanent holiday from war. Alas, reality, much like your alarm clock on a Monday morning, rarely accommodates such wishes. You find yourself facing the German corporal with the kind eyes, the one who explained the rules of their football in broken English. He extends a hand, not for a handshake this time, but just an open palm, a gesture of lingering connection. You mirror it, your fingers brushing his. There's a shared glance, a silent communication that transcends language. "This was something, wasn't it?" And the unspoken reply, "Yes." And it's over now. It's a moment of raw, unvarnished humanity, stripped bare of all the pomp and circumstance, the flags and anthems that usually define their conflict. It's just two men, acknowledging a shared, precious anomaly. The farewells are quiet, almost clandestine. There are no rousing cheers, no promises to meet again under different circumstances. That would be too cruel, too much of a mockery of the grim truth that awaits them. Instead, it's a series of nods, faint smiles that don't quite reach the eyes, and a lingering reluctance to break eye contact. You see men exchange a final, lingering look, as if trying to commit the face of their temporary comrade to memory, knowing that the next time they might see them, it would be through the sights of a rifle. It's a profoundly sad exchange, tinged with a desperate hope that somehow, this shared experience might prevent that next fatal encounter. One of the mainstream historical facts about the Christmas Truce is that while spontaneous truces occurred in many places, and some lasted until New Year's Day, most senior officers on both sides were quite clear that hostilities must resume on Boxing Day. Orders were given, sometimes quite forcefully, to ensure that the fraternization ceased. This quiet farewell, then, is not entirely voluntary for many. It's the dawning realization that the brief, unofficial reprieve is about to be violently revoked by those higher up the chain of command, who viewed such fraternization with deep suspicion and concern for morale. You watch as the last few gifts are exchanged, not grand items, but small tokens, almost talismans against the coming darkness. A German button for a British cap badge, a small piece of chocolate for a cigarette, a final, whispered Gute Nacht or good night. It's like a bizarre, silent auction of peace, where the currency isn't money, but moments of shared humanity. You find yourself clutching the button you received earlier, its smooth, cold surface a small anchor in the rising tide of unease. It's a tiny, mundane object, yet in this context, it feels like an artifact from another world. The air grows colder, the wind picking up a little, rustling through the barbed wire and the few skeletal trees that still stand in the ravaged landscape. The last vestiges of light drain from the sky, leaving behind a deep, bruised indigo. The silence, which had been so welcome earlier, now feels heavy, pregnant with unspoken dread. It's the kind of quiet that makes the hairs on your arms stand up, not from cold, but from anticipation. The kind of quiet that precedes a storm, or, in this case, the resumption of a storm that had merely paused for a very, very strange tea break. There's a quirky, almost absurd tidbit from some accounts of the truce's end, the sheer awkwardness of the first shot being fired. Soldiers on both sides, having just spent hours in amiable conversation, sometimes found it incredibly difficult to be the one to break the peace. There are stories of officers literally having to fire warning shots over their own men's heads to get them to resume firing, or of the first few shots being deliberately aimed high, a kind of soft launch back into warfare, as if they were saying, "Okay, we have to do this now, but let's not be too enthusiastic about it, all right?" This mutual reluctance underscores just how profoundly the truce had affected the men on the ground. It wasn't just a break, it was a reset of their humanity, however brief. As you turn, your boots sinking slightly into the cold, damp earth, you catch the eye of a British sergeant, a grizzled veteran who'd seen too much. He gives you a grim, knowing nod. There's no joy in it, no relief, just a shared understanding of the bizarre tightrope they've just walked. It's a moment that forces you to confront the profound absurdity of it all. How quickly men can switch from trying to kill each other to exchanging pleasantries, and then back again. It's enough to make you wonder if the whole thing isn't just some elaborate, cosmic prank by a particularly bored deity. Historians still argue whether the Christmas Truce was a truly spontaneous uprising of human spirit, or if it was, in part, a manifestation of the live and let live system that had already developed in quieter sectors of the front. Was it a unique, one-off event, or simply a more widespread and overt expression of an unofficial understanding that had been simmering beneath the surface for weeks, even months? The truth, as always, probably lies somewhere in the murky middle, but the impact on the individual soldiers, regardless of its origin, was undeniably profound. You take a deep breath, the cold air stinging your lungs, and begin the short, familiar journey back to your own trench. The figures of the German soldiers, now silhouetted against the deepening twilight, grow smaller, less distinct, until they merge with the shadows of their own parapet. The silence that follows their disappearance is not the friendly silence of shared companionship, but the empty, waiting silence of the battlefield, a silence that hums with latent violence. The warmth of the fleeting camaraderie, the taste of foreign bread, the memory of shared laughter, it all lingers, a ghost of comfort in the rapidly chilling air. This isn't just saying goodbye to a few strangers. It's saying goodbye to a moment, a precious, fragile bubble of peace that defied all expectations, all logic. You know, with a certainty that settles deep in your gut, that this day, this utterly unbelievable Christmas day, will be etched into your memory, a quiet, defiant testament to humanity in the most inhuman of circumstances. It was a moment cherished, precisely because you knew, with every fiber of your being, that it could not and would not last. The sun, what little of it managed to pierce the perpetually overcast Belgian sky, dips lower now, casting long, skeletal shadows across the torn earth. You feel the familiar, almost gravitational pull of your own trench, a reluctant magnet drawing you back from the impossible dream of no man's land. It's a slow, squelching trudge, each bootlift a small battle against the clinging mud, a final, physical reminder of where you truly are. You glance back, just once, at the disappearing figures of the men you've just shared plum pudding and laughter with. They're retreating too, their gray uniforms blending into the deepening twilight, becoming mere smudges against the horizon. It's like the end of a particularly surreal, muddy school play, where everyone just disperses back to their mundane lives. Only your mundane life involves potential death. The air, which felt almost warm and breathable just an hour ago, now carries a sharper, keener edge. It bites at your exposed skin, a chilling premonition of the night to come. You pull your collar higher, the wool scratchy against your neck, a small, futile gesture against the encroaching cold. The sound of distant artillery, which had been blissfully absent all day, now seems to rumble faintly, a low, guttural growl on the wind, like a sleeping monster stirring. It's not direct fire, not yet, but it's a whisper, a promise of the reality that's patiently waited for you to finish your little holiday. As you step back over the sandbags, slipping down into the familiar confines of your dugout, the air instantly feels heavier, denser. The smell is back too, that particular earthy, damp, slightly metallic scent of the trench. It's a smell that clings to your uniform, to your hair, to the very fabric of your being. A scent that screams war. Your mates are already there, some huddled around a sputtering brazier, others silently cleaning their rifles. The chatter is subdued, a stark contrast to the boisterous camaraderie of the last few hours. It's as if everyone is processing the same bizarre, beautiful, deeply unsettling experience. You find your spot, a small, muddy indentation in the wall, and sink down, your back protesting slightly. The warmth, that strange, internal glow that had radiated from the shared laughter and the impossible handshakes, still lingers. It's a phantom warmth, like the ghost of a good meal, a comforting memory that hasn't quite dissipated. You can still feel the roughness of that German soldier's hand in yours, the surprising weight of the button he gave you, now tucked carefully into your breast pocket. It's a tiny, tangible piece of a day that feels more like a dream than reality. You pull out the half-smoked cigarette he gave you, a brand you don't recognize, and light it. The smoke is harsh, but there's a strange comfort in it, a shared vice across enemy lines. The silence within the trench is different from the silence of no man's land. That was a silence of peace, a chosen quiet. This is a silence of anticipation, of unspoken thoughts, of men bracing themselves for the inevitable return to the grim business of war. Someone coughs, a deep, hacking sound that echoes off the damp earth walls. Another scrapes a mess tin. These are the sounds of your world, the sounds that tell you the temporary reprieve is over. It's like when the school bell rings after a particularly fun recess, and you know it's time to go back to math class. Only in this case, math class involves high explosives. You find yourself replaying moments in your mind. The football match, the way the German lad cheered when your side scored, completely forgetting for a moment that you were supposed to be enemies. The shared look of sorrow as you buried the fallen, side by side. It's these small, profoundly human interactions that stick. They're shards of light in the overwhelming darkness, proving that beneath the uniforms and the propaganda, there were just men. Men who missed their families, men who were cold and hungry, men who just wanted to kick a ball around for a bit. The officers, you notice, are moving with a renewed sense of purpose. Whispers travel down the line, hushed instructions about resuming patrols, about the importance of vigilance. The official line, as you'll hear reiterated countless times in the coming days, is that such fraternization is strictly forbidden. It undermines discipline, it weakens the resolve. In fact, official orders from both sides were quickly issued after the truce, explicitly forbidding any future attempts at fraternization, with severe penalties for disobedience. It's almost as if the high command realized that if the soldiers actually got to know each other, the whole us versus them narrative might just unravel. And where would that leave the war effort? Probably in a very awkward place, like trying to explain to your boss why you're suddenly friends with the guy you were supposed to be competing against for that big promotion. A sergeant walks past, his boots crunching on the duckboards. He doesn't meet your eye, but his posture, his very presence, radiates the return of military order. The gentle, almost whimsical atmosphere of the day is being systematically dismantled, brick by brick, by the grim architecture of duty. You can feel it like a slow-acting poison, seeping back into the trench, replacing the fleeting warmth with its familiar, icy grip. There's a small, almost imperceptible shift in the air, a tightening of the collective mood. The laughter and easy banter of the day are replaced by a more guarded silence. You see it in the eyes of your comrades, a hardening, a return to the weary vigilance that is the soldier's default setting. It's the mental equivalent of putting on your thickest, scratchiest wool socks after a day of bare feet in the sun. Necessary, but far less comfortable. You think about the small, quirky tidbit you heard from one of the German soldiers, how some units had actually been instructed to sing louder, to try and drown out the British carols, but it had backfired spectacularly, only encouraging more singing from both sides. A truly fringe tidbit, perhaps, but it highlighted the inherent human desire for connection, even in the most absurd of circumstances. It's like trying to stop a spontaneous dance party by playing even louder, terrible music. Sometimes it just makes people dance harder. The cold seeps into your bones now, a deeper, more pervasive chill than before. It's not just the external temperature, it's the internal one. The warmth of human connection, that unexpected balm, is slowly being replaced by the cold, hard reality of the conflict. Your hands, which felt surprisingly warm after shaking so many others, now feel numb. You rub them together, but it's a futile gesture. The dampness from the trench walls seems to cling to everything, a constant, insidious reminder of your environment. Historians still argue whether the widespread nature of the truce was a spontaneous grassroots movement, or if it had some tacit, unwritten understanding from lower-ranking officers who simply looked the other way. Was it truly a miracle of human decency, or a pragmatic, albeit temporary, ceasefire driven by mutual exhaustion and the spirit of the season? The truth, as always, is probably a murky blend of both, like trying to make sense of a dream after you've just woken up, some parts clear, others frustratingly hazy. You look down at your muddy boots, the leather cracked and worn. This is your reality. This trench, this mud, this constant state of alert. The brief interlude, the Christmas miracle, whatever you want to call it, was just that, an interlude. The curtain has fallen, the lights are coming up, and the audience is shuffling out. You're back on stage, and the next act is about to begin. The familiar chill of war, like a tenacious fog, slowly reclaims its grip, seeping into every crack and crevice, reminding you that Christmas is over, and the fighting inevitably must resume. The quiet conversations of the truce now feel like echoes from another dimension, beautiful but impossibly distant. You pull the coarse wool blanket tighter around your shoulders, the damp chill of the trench seeping into your bones, yet something else lingers, a warmth that defies the December air. It's not the faint, metallic tang of the bully beef you just ate, nor the acrid scent of damp earth and stale smoke that usually permeates everything. No, this is a different kind of warmth, an echo, a quiet hum in the stillness that has once again fallen over no man's land. The familiar, oppressive silence of war is back, but it's been subtly altered, like a piece of music played just a little differently. It's no longer the silence of dread, but a silence pregnant with memory, heavy with the weight of the impossible. You close your eyes, and instantly the faces are there. Not the grim, determined visages of your comrades, nor the distant, menacing figures of the enemy, but the open, curious, sometimes even shy expressions of the men you met just hours ago. You can still feel the rough fabric of that German tunic as you clapped a fellow on the shoulder, the surprisingly soft texture of the plum pudding as you offered it, the unexpected crunch of the dark bread he gave in return. Who knew German bread could be so substantial? My plum pudding suddenly felt like a lightweight contender in the international snack-off. These aren't just fleeting images, they are tactile, olfactory, a full sensory replay looping in your mind's theater. The memory of their laughter, a sound so utterly incongruous with the setting, still plays in your ears. It wasn't the forced gallows humor of the trenches, but genuine, unburdened mirth, particularly during that utterly chaotic football match. You chuckle softly now, remembering the sheer absurdity of it all. I swear half the offsides calls were just tactical retreats to avoid a particularly muddy patch, not actual infringements of any known football rule. It was a game played on the world's most dangerous pitch, with stakes that were both incredibly high and utterly meaningless at the same time. A fleeting moment where the greatest threat wasn't a bullet, but a clumsy tackle. And then there's the quiet, almost reverent way they handled the fallen, your fallen and theirs. The shared solemnity of that task, the way hands reached out not to fight, but to help, to gently lower a comrade into the cold earth. It carved a deep, indelible mark on your soul. It's one thing to hear about the enemy, to be told they are faceless monsters, to dehumanize them for the sake of survival. It's quite another to see them weep for their own, to watch them carefully close the eyes of a young man who, just yesterday, was on the other side of a rifle scope. That shared moment of quiet grief, a universal language spoken without words, stripped away every layer of propaganda and hatred. You saw them not as the enemy, but as men just like you, caught in the same dreadful trap. This isn't just a fleeting impression, it's a profound shift in perspective. You find yourself looking at the opposite trench line now, not with the usual simmering resentment or the cold, calculated assessment of potential threats, but with a strange, almost wistful curiosity. Are they thinking the same thing? Are they, too, replaying the day's events, tracing the lines of the faces they met, feeling the phantom warmth of a handshake? The quiet conversations you shared with your own mates earlier, back in the relative safety of the trench, were different tonight. Less about the war, more about the wonder. Did you see that chap? The one with the pipe? He had a good laugh, didn't he? The shared experience was too potent, too surreal, to simply dismiss. It was almost like a really bizarre, very muddy, international exchange program, wasn't it? Just without the academic credits, and with considerably more danger. This truce, this impossible Christmas miracle, wasn't just an isolated incident in one small sector. No, the Christmas Truce of 1914 was a far more widespread phenomenon than many realize, occurring in numerous locations along the Western Front, from the Belgian coast all the way to Alsace. While not every unit participated, and some sectors remained locked in brutal combat, the sheer scale of the unofficial ceasefires and fraternization surprised even the highest commands on both sides. Generals, far removed from the muddy reality of the trenches, were aghast, fearing that such displays of humanity would undermine the very will to fight. They immediately issued stern orders, threatening severe punishment for any future fraternization, and rotating units to prevent such bonds from forming again. It was a top-down attempt to re-establish the narrative of absolute enmity, to erase the inconvenient truth that soldiers on opposing sides could, in fact, see each other as human beings. And yet, despite the official disapproval, despite the harsh reprimands and the threat of court-martial, the memory persisted. It became a quiet, almost subversive legend, whispered in the trenches long after the guns roared back to life. You heard the stories, even if you didn't participate yourself. Tales of shared cigarettes, of impromptu sing-alongs, of German soldiers helping British stretcher-bearers retrieve their wounded. One particularly quirky tidbit that always stuck with you, something you heard from a corporal who swore it was true, involved a group of Scottish soldiers and a German unit exchanging addresses, promising to send each other postcards after the war. Imagine that, a pen pal program born out of a battlefield truce. Whether any of those postcards ever actually arrived, lost in the mail or the chaos of the subsequent years, is a question that tickles your mind, a tiny poignant what if. It speaks to an almost childlike optimism, a genuine hope that the world might, just might, return to normal. The memory of the truce wasn't just a personal experience. It became part of the collective consciousness of the war, a stark counterpoint to the relentless horror. It was a powerful, quiet testament to the possibility of peace even in the darkest of times, a glimmer of light in the overwhelming gloom. It challenged the very notion of total war, suggesting that even amidst the most profound conflict, the shared threads of humanity could, and did, occasionally break through. It proved that the men fighting were not inherently evil, not monstrous, but simply men, caught in a system far larger and more brutal than themselves. Historians still argue whether the Christmas Truce was a genuine expression of nascent pacifism and a desire for an end to the war, or simply a pragmatic, temporary respite born of mutual exhaustion, a brief, unsanctioned holiday from the brutal reality of trench warfare. Was it a moment of true, spontaneous brotherhood, or merely a practical agreement to avoid unnecessary casualties during a religious holiday? The truth, as always, is likely far more nuanced than either extreme. Perhaps it was a bit of both, a complex tapestry woven from weariness, curiosity, and a profound, undeniable longing for something better. Whatever its ultimate interpretation, its existence cannot be denied. It happened. Men laid down their arms, stepped into the void, and met their supposed enemies as fellow human beings. As you drift closer to sleep, the images soften, blurring at the edges, but the feeling remains. It's a quiet ache, a bittersweet knowledge that such moments are rare, precious, and often brutally short-lived. But it's also a comfort, because if it could happen then, in the mud and blood of the Western Front, amidst the deafening roar of artillery and the endless propaganda, then perhaps, just perhaps, that fragile spark of shared humanity can always be found. It whispers to you now, a gentle, persistent hum beneath the surface of all the noise and chaos, a reminder that even when the world seems determined to tear itself apart, there is always, always the possibility of connection, of understanding, of a quiet, unexpected peace. You find yourself back in the trench, the familiar damp earth beneath your boots, the scent of stale mud and distant wood smoke filling your nostrils. The chill, though no longer quite so biting, still reminds you where you are. The sound of distant artillery, a low rumble like a grumbling stomach after a particularly large Christmas dinner, has returned, but it's muted, almost polite. It's as if even the war itself is still a little bit shy after its brief, unexpected holiday. You clutch the small, smooth button in your palm, a German uniform button, plain, brass, a token exchanged for a cigarette. It feels impossibly heavy, not with its own weight, but with the weight of what it represents. Just hours ago, this very button was on the tunic of a man who, by all official accounts, was your enemy. Yet, he laughed, he shared, he spoke of his family. He was in short just a bloke. Funny how quickly the labels peel away when you're not actively trying to shoot each other, isn't it? It's almost like the propaganda posters had it all wrong, and these chaps weren't actually green-skinned goblins with fangs, but just people. Who knew? The quiet of the trench now feels different. It's not the oppressive, watchful silence of before, but a silence pregnant with memory, echoing with the soft cadences of foreign voices and the ghost of shared laughter. You can still almost taste the crumbly German bread, a stark contrast to your own plum pudding, which, let's be honest, was probably more plum than pudding by the time it reached the front lines. And the football match. Oh, the football. You can still feel the thud of the makeshift ball against your worn boot, the collective cheer, the pure, unadulterated joy of chasing a spherical object with a bunch of strangers, all of whom, moments before, were trying to kill you. It's a bit like finding out your archenemy in a video game is actually your best mate from school, just with more mud and less respawning. This extraordinary interlude, this bizarre, beautiful anomaly was, of course, fleeting. Like a particularly vivid dream upon waking, its edges already begin to blur, though its core remains stubbornly clear. The high command, as you instinctively knew they would, were absolutely furious. Imagine trying to explain to a general, who's probably spent his entire career planning how to obliterate the enemy, that his troops were out there playing football with them. It's the kind of thing that makes a chap spill his tea, isn't it? Orders quickly came down the line, stern, unyielding, reminding everyone precisely what their purpose was. This couldn't happen again. And for the most part, it didn't, at least not on this scale. Yet, its very existence, however brief, was a defiant roar against the machinery of war. It was a spontaneous eruption of common humanity, a moment where the official narrative of hatred and division simply crumbled under the weight of a shared Christmas spirit. It wasn't a grand, organized peace treaty, mind you. It was a grassroots uprising of decency, a collection of small, localized truces that spread like wildfire across certain sectors of the Western Front. Historians still argue whether the scale of the Christmas Truce was truly widespread across the entire front or confined to isolated pockets. But what is undisputed is its profound symbolic power. It wasn't every unit, everywhere, of course. Some sectors remained locked in brutal combat, oblivious to the strange camaraderie unfolding just miles away. But where it did happen, it was a profound, almost sacred defiance. You remember the quiet conversations, the halting efforts to bridge the language divide with gestures and shared glances. The way someone pointed to a photograph of their wife, and you instantly understood, even without a single word of German. Or the shared task of burying the fallen, a somber, unifying act that transcended the battle lines. It's hard to hate someone when you're both silently digging graves for men who, just yesterday, were on opposing sides. It's a bit like sharing a particularly awful chore with a rival. You might still dislike them, but you've got a shared experience of misery, which, in some strange way, brings you closer. This was not a truce born of official decree, but of shared misery and an ancient human impulse towards connection. It was the soldiers themselves, the men in the trenches, who, for a few precious hours, decided to declare their own peace. A quirky tidbit often overlooked is that some officers, rather than directly participating, simply turned a blind eye, retreating into their dugouts and pretending not to notice the sudden lack of gunfire, perhaps enjoying a quiet, unofficial Christmas themselves. They knew deep down that this was something extraordinary, something that defied logic and military protocol, but perhaps also something deeply human and necessary. Imagine the internal conflict. Do I report this breach of discipline, or do I just enjoy the silence and a bit of plum pudding? A tough choice, I'm sure. The Christmas Truce of 1914 wasn't a solution to the war. It was a momentary suspension. It didn't stop the fighting that resumed with brutal intensity in the days and weeks that followed. But it left an indelible mark. It proved that even in the most dehumanizing of circumstances, humanity finds a way to assert itself. It's a powerful, quiet testament to the possibility of peace, not just as an abstract concept, but as a tangible, lived experience, even in the darkest of times. It whispers a message that transcends time and conflict, that beneath the uniforms and the flags, beneath the rhetoric of hatred and the machinery of war, there often lies a shared humanity, waiting for a chance to emerge. You might think of it as a historical outlier, a charming anomaly. But perhaps it's more than that. Perhaps it's a reminder that peace isn't always something negotiated in grand halls by dignitaries, but something that can spontaneously erupt from the ground up, from the shared recognition of a common spirit. It's a story that endures because it speaks to something fundamental within us, the hope that even when the world seems determined to tear itself apart, there's a quiet, persistent whisper of connection, a gentle tug towards understanding. It's the historical equivalent of finding a forgotten 10-pound note in an old coat pocket, a small, unexpected joy in a grim situation. As you settle deeper into the mud and the lingering echoes of the day, you understand that this memory, this quiet experience, is something you will carry with you. It's a counter-narrative to the endless noise of war, a personal secret that challenges everything you've been told. The Christmas Truce of 1914, a fleeting moment in the vast tapestry of a brutal conflict, continues to whisper its message. It reminds us that even when pushed to the brink, when pitted against each other by forces beyond our control, the capacity for compassion, for shared laughter, for simple human connection remains. It reminds us that sometimes the most revolutionary act isn't a battle won, but a game of football played in no man's land. And so, as the last vestiges of that extraordinary day fade into the long, dark night, you find yourself drifting. The sounds of the trench, once sharp and insistent, now soften, blurring into a gentle hum. The chill in the air seems less biting, replaced by a quiet warmth that settles deep within you, a warmth born not of fire, but of memory. Allow your thoughts to unfurl slowly, like the softest of blankets settling around you. The images of the truce, once so vivid and immediate, now recede, becoming soft impressions, gentle echoes in the quiet chambers of your mind. The laughter, the carols, the simple exchange of gifts, they are not gone but transformed, carried on the soft currents of the night air. Feel the subtle shift in your breath, growing deeper, more even, as if the very air around you is encouraging you to surrender to a profound peace. The weight of the day, with its incredible contrasts and its quiet moments of connection, begins to lift, leaving behind only a sense of wonder, a gentle curiosity about the enduring nature of hope. You are safe now, cocooned in the comforting stillness. The distant rumble of the world outside fades into an almost imperceptible whisper, a lullaby of quietude. Let your mind become a calm, still pool, reflecting only the soft glow of distant stars. The story of the Christmas Truce, a testament to the quiet strength of shared humanity, has found its home within you. Allow its gentle message to guide you softly into the deepest, most peaceful slumber. Rest now,